Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining the network here on Facebook Live. I'm April Garner, founder of the network, and of course, every Friday we come to you with information about COVID-19 with some great updates from our very own Dr. Winston McIver Jr. How are you doing today, Dr. Mac?
Doing good. How about you, Miss April?
Doing well today. We also have joining us today a wonderful panel of guests who represent some of the finest funeral establishments across Horry and Marion counties and all surrounding areas. We'd like to say hello to all of our guests today, and I'm going to allow them to do their own introductions. Of course, you know, today's topic is all about the end of life realities of COVID-19. And so our guests will be sharing their insights on what's been happening since the onslaught of the virus and how they're coping with it within their communities through the work that they do. So why don't we start? I'm going to start on the checkerboard with George Williams. Since you're at the top of the clock, why don't you please introduce yourself and then we'll just make our way around.
Okay. Well, I'm George Williams, and I'm here at McKeever Funeral Home right here in Conway. I've been here for since 1982, so I might be the senior member of the panel, but things are good, and happy to be with you today.
Awesome. Thank you. We're glad to have you here. Ms. Tammy?
Hi, my name is Tammy Gore Williams. I'm with Ocean View Funeral Home, Conway and Myrtle Beach, and glad to be here.
Thank you. Definitely glad to have you with us. Poyette?
Hello, I'm Poyette McGill-Bromell with Jackson McGill Funeral Home. Our business is located in Marion, South Carolina. Been in the business for 92 years in this industry. 30 of those years I've spent with my family's business. And I'm an embalmer and funeral director.
Awesome.
Happy to be here.
Happy to have you as well. And of course, Marvin Latimer.
Hi, April. Hello, everybody. My name is Marvin Latimer of the Latimer Funeral Home since 1924. Feel like I've been here that long, too.
I'm sure you all know, if you know Marvin, you know he's probably going to bring the humor to this discussion today. He's quite a character, and that's okay, because it's pretty deep.
I just need my own TV show. That's all I need. You know what I'm saying?
That's it. That is it. So anyway, thank you all for joining us. Our viewers, I just want to remind you that if you have any questions or comments, please post them to the Facebook stream on any of the sites that you're visiting, either my pages or group pages. We're sharing this to Whittemore Community Magazine's page, the network, the HBCU or Horry County Black Community United, as well as the Gullah Geechee Chamber of Commerce page. So if you're viewing from those pages, thank you for joining us. And please do not feel shy about asking any questions you may have about this particular topic. So now that we've gotten through the introductions, of course, typically Dr. McIver delivers his COVID-19 updates at this time, but we do have one guest panelist who needs to exit a little earlier. So we want to get right into the discussion, and then we'll tackle the COVID-19 updates really soon. So let's just get started with, what obviously is happening in our local community with COVID-19. There's more that we're dealing with aside from just cases of COVID-19. We're also dealing with the COVID-19 deaths. And as funeral directors and owners of these establishments, you all have the task of making sure that our loved ones are buried with dignity and that you're handling these ceremonies in the way that has been established for this particular crisis at this time. And what we know is that a lot of people are unsure of what those protocols are. And you all have a really big job aside from just taking care of services in terms of making sure that the public stays educated on what's happening with these services now and how families need to plan or what they need to do in order to get ready for what may be the inevitable for their loved one. So let's just kind of start with what you all have been experiencing throughout the communities, and particularly the African-American communities, because I know that you probably serve a larger portion of the African-American communities in these counties. What do you all think has been the biggest adjustment for people in our community when it comes down to COVID deaths?
Traditional funerals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Church funerals. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Traditional funerals. I mean, with this COVID-19, A lot of funeral homes, including Ocean View, we're not doing what we per se is a traditional funeral, meaning a church funeral, visitation. So all that has changed right now, and in the African American community, that's what we do. That's tradition.
I think even the social connection with those traditional services, the interaction of family and family members, even our interaction with the families
Right.
is totally different from what we're used to, and even our personalities, I think. So you're right on point.
I think both of those are right, April, because I think social distancing is just very difficult for Black people in general. Just because we're more emotional, I can say that because I'm Black, and I think it's hard for us to stay 6 feet away from people.
Right.
It's hard for us to stay 6 inches away from people. So much less 6 feet. So, I mean, to be honest with you, we're trying to conduct a funeral within guidelines. It's just implausible and unrealistic to have 20 people or less 6 feet radius around it. You'd have to be at a football field to have a funeral service. I mean, let's be honest about it. And you can't really do that. The whole difficult part about it is, I think what's the game changer, maybe I'm fast forward the conversation. The game changer has been asymptomatic spreaders, because now you don't know who have it. And to be honest with you, DHEC is so slow as far as getting test results back. Somebody can be crucified, dead, and buried before you get a test back that says it's positive. So, you have to kind of go under the universal precautions guidelines and kind of assume everybody's got it, basically.
Yeah, that's true.
It's difficult to kind of conduct business because it's just, as Barack Obama said, we're not ready for the pandemic, and he was right.
I think one of the things, so that the longer the time, I think people are adjusting. The notion of this a month and a half ago was just unreal, but now that they've heard it, they're hearing it. I think the being able to receive it, understand the reason why. I think we're closer to being able to embrace it. And, it seems like each service, more and more people understand it. They've been through it. Yeah. They've seen it. They've heard about it. And you're getting a better reaction to it.
That's true.
What were your first thoughts whenever you realized, okay, we are in the midst of a pandemic and this is going to be, like Marvin said, a game changer? What were your personal thoughts?
Scary. It was scary because we didn't know. And as Marvin said, the asymptomatic, I mean, somebody could be sitting right next to you that have it and you don't know it. They don't know it. It's just all, to me, it's just all scary because, I mean, people are dying behind it. So when it first came about, the COVID-19, that's the first thing I thought, like, oh, Lord, what are we going to do? How will we handle this? Because it was scary, and it still is scary. To me, it is, because it's so real that people are dying from this.
I think it kind of reminds me of when AIDS first came out, probably I think circa 88, 89 maybe. We didn't know how it was transferred from one person to another, so we just kind of everybody was afraid about it. I'll never forget the first AIDS case we had came from Jersey, and I made all the guys wear rubber gloves with pallbearer gloves on top of them. We were scared to touch the head back in the day, That's back before we knew it was a bloodborne pathogen, and then OSHA got involved and all that. OSHA's dropped the ball on this. You don't hear anything from OSHA, basically. Everything is WHO or CDC. And we work in this industry, and there's no guidelines really that OSHA's put out, So I think they kind of dropped the ball on the matter. I don't even have to get into the administration dropping the ball. Everybody can see that. Stevie Wonder can see that.
I guess when I first heard it, I was thinking more that it was people who traveled, because this was, that November, December. You're thinking that the people who travel overseas, those kind of connections. So the reality of it, I think, when it got to America, it was like, oh wow, it's here. So I think that was just kind of an eye opener when the first case, got to America. Then I think it was just a reality of how fast it travels, and so trying to make those adjustments, but it was different.
Right. And so as you've had to make those adjustments, I'm sure that a part of it was also how would you communicate what families are to expect as they go through these unfortunate losses. So, what did each of you decide was the best course of action to make sure that the message was clear about how you as a funeral home director or owner was going to handle or needed to handle these cases?
I just felt like the best thing is to be honest and be forthcoming. Let them know exactly on the front end what you could and could not do, what you were comfortable with doing, such that there was no ambiguity as to how they're going to take it. And you give it to them the way it was, and and I think that was how I felt and approached it on the front end.
April, I've seen a little difference, to be honest, which I'm not sure if it's media driven or what the logistics of it is, but I think I see people less afraid of it this week than it was last week. I went to Walmart yesterday. I counted out of 40 people, I saw 4 people with a mask on. Okay. Basically, that's 1%. So I think people are less afraid of it. And I'll tell you what I think is going to happen, and it happened right after I had a conversation with the newspaper earlier today. I think what's going to happen is, from an economic standpoint, the politicians are going to lean on DHEC to cut back on death reporting because they think it's bad for the tourism business. And I swear to God, I saw on Yahoo News that they're stopping the medical examiner from reporting deaths in Florida. So there you go right there. So I think we're going to see, from an economic standpoint, they're pushing everything to get back open because, trust me, we're all in the business industry. We're all professionals. We all have to pay light bill, water bill, limousine payment, that type of thing. So we understand the economics of it, and in the scale and in the balances also, people's lives are at risk because, like I sent you a story yesterday about, people. We live in a litigious society. People are more prone to sue you if they think you have deep pockets, and they can say, "Hey, I went here and I caught this virus because of you." People are already suing cruise lines already. They're going to be suing restaurants. So I think we as professionals in this industry, we got to be cognizant of that. So we definitely have to follow every letter of the law as far as the CDC, WHO, as far as what they do. Man, the problem is it's a sliding scale. The federal government's already eased social distancing guidelines from the federal level. Now it's based on states. And I tell you, South Carolina's going to be next when they relax social distancing too. So it's going to be a hodgepodge of things going together, and I think that's the problem. There's no universal guidelines and no universal edicts being laid down, and so I think that's what's made our jobs as funeral professionals very difficult because when it first came out, it was 50 people, and it changed to 25 people, and it's 6 feet. Then they say maybe 6 feet, maybe it could travel 20 feet. So it's just a novel concept where it's very difficult to progress from a professional standpoint, especially in a business that we operate in, the social and is closely tied to the community.
Right. And the points you just made lead me to the question of whether or not you all are ready for the second wave. And I know that Dr. McIver is going to talk about some statistics in a little bit. And yes, with the businesses reopening and things are, I guess, starting to unravel a little bit, if you want to use that word. I'm sure you've had to probably beef up staffing. Or do you have enough supplies? Are you prepared for what's to come? But also, do you see 2 parts? Are you ready? And number 2, is it apparent that people are getting the message and they're paying attention to your guidelines so that we can kind of flatten the curve a little bit and stop the spread of this thing? Or are people just still doing what they want to do when it comes down to the services?
Trying to do what they want to do, because like Mr. Latimer say, it's hard to tell 20 people to go to a graveside service and that's all they can be there. It's hard to say, can you social distance yourself from each other, because they're all standing around, they're grieving together, and like he said, we are people that show emotion through touch and feel, so they're all standing together. So I don't know, to me, they're just still doing what they want to do. No one wears a mask. You might have 25 people on the service, and it might be 7 people with a mask on. So with us, with our staff, we are wearing masks and we are social distancing ourselves. Even throughout the service, we're social distancing ourselves from everyone at the service. As much as we can. I mean, we don't want to be rude and say, well, can you go stand over there 6 feet? We're not doing that. But we're just making sure that we're keeping ourselves social distance so we can continue to stay safe for our staff and our families when we leave that service.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Can I say something?
Yes.
Well, we had about 5 or 6 questions there, and I didn't chime in, but I'll just try to condense it all if I can. Just a general response. You asked earlier about what's different, the biggest challenge, and I will agree with everyone on the panel thus far that the cultural shift has been the biggest challenge because we are socially oriented people, and we're very physical with our emotions and our socialization. And so that has been a challenge. However, I've had great results in terms of what we've done here in Marion County because we got on the very, very front end of this thing and communicated to the people via Facebook, through our COVID policy, which every family gets. As soon as we make contact with that family, they receive a written COVID policy. We go over the COVID policy in the arrangement conference. We actually go over it with them over the phone before they even come into arrangement conference. And this thing has been revised already because I told them when we first put our COVID policy in place that we don't know what we're dealing with here. And as the CDC, as the governor, whoever the powers that be, make different policies or make different restrictions for people's movement or whatever, that we would have to possibly change our policy. And we have. And so because we communicated that, we were open and honest, as everyone else has said, open and honest from the very beginning, that, first of all, we didn't know what this was.
Right.
And we were, concerned about our own health and certainly concerned about the health of the public, that we were going to try to make sure that we did everything within the guidelines. And to Marvin's point, no one has really given us any direction in the funeral industry.
Right.
They've been giving direction as far as, social gathering, where the governor set up the 3-person policy as far as social gathering, but he was talking about spontaneous gatherings of people in the street or, parks and this kind of thing. And because I directly asked Congressman Clyburn's office to give me some sense of direction when I heard that 3-person policy, and I said, now how in the world are we going to conduct a funeral if only 3 people can be there? And so they said, no, that doesn't apply to funerals. I said, okay, well, so what's the policy? They don't really have a policy.
Right.
So what we did was we synergized here in the 6th district. Some of us morticians got together. We synergized and put together what the CDC had put in place, what the governor was saying, and what we knew was common sense when you have a respiratory disease that can be easily spread from person to person, from surface to person. What would you do in a sensible system? And so that's when we came up with our policies as to how we would interact, what we expected of people. No mask, no entry. I don't have problems with people coming in our chapel without a mask on because they know they're supposed to have one on. They don't enter the building, even if they come to drop off an announcement. They don't even enter the building without sanitizing, and they sanitize when they leave. So, but those policies have been so communicated. First of all, the training with my staff to let them know what I expected of them. But we were only building on our universal precautions that we'd already put in place because of what we've been doing for the past 30 years with the AIDS epidemic that started in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
We already knew. I already use universal precautions. I treat everybody like they have COVID-19 or AIDS or tuberculosis or meningitis. So I don't have that issue. So there was no big leap for me as far as the embalming side. And while we're speaking on that too, we can set some of your listeners' minds at ease in terms of a funeral with a viewing for a COVID victim. If a body has been sanitized and embalmed, that body is not going to pose any problem or issue for the people attending the funeral and having a viewing. The issue that we have with a COVID victim is a COVID victim has a COVID exposed family.
Right.
Exactly.
And so that is why we put in our 14-day wait period. for a, we have a COVID, we have one. And the family has had to wait 14 days in order to plan this funeral. And we had a telephone conference. And after that telephone conference, a member of that family was hospitalized who would have normally been in my conference room. And so, and has just been released. And so we are just, using common sense and trying to be very practical. And, that's what's going on in Marion County as far as, and we've communicated that with our other fellow morticians. And so and this wasn't a selfish thing. We came up with a policy and then we shared the policy with others and they could adjust it to fit their situation. So that's been the great thing about working together as professionals in the COVID-19 environment, is that we're being able to share information, come up with something that's kind of uniform, so that people won't have a feeling like from county to county or from funeral home to funeral home that they're being treated differently.
Right.
And so that's been our experience.
Poet, you mentioned the 14-day waiting period, and someone just texted me and asked that you explain that again. So you're saying if someone dies today, you have to wait 14 days to bury them?
If a person is a known, our coroner informed us that this particular person was a COVID-19 victim, and that the spouse was a victim as well. Those two individuals were living in the house with another person. That other person was the individual who was supposed to be making arrangements with me.
Okay.
You know as well as I do, if I right now were to find out that me or my husband, or say my husband was COVID-19, and I find that out, I have to self-quarantine for 14 days.
Yes.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's the procedure. So it's no different with a funeral. You can't just have a person who's been exposed to someone who has this disease to come in contact with 20, 30, 50 people, whatever your limit's going to be. Our limit is 50. But if whatever your limit's going to be, you can't have that person exposed or expose themselves to that many people. And I know some people who've done it, and I'm terrified for the people attending that funeral, because you're really taking a chance, because 14 days will give that person enough time to either manifest that disease or prove that it's not in their system.
Okay. So how many of you, I'm sorry, go ahead.
But that does not apply to regular funerals. Once a person has passed, I've had several funerals since this person has passed. It doesn't apply to every person. It's only when it's a known COVID victim. The individuals in that family must quarantine.
So now that we're all kind of in virtual environments doing everything, how many of you have had to actually handle arrangements via Zoom or, any other social media, well, not social media, but video conferencing platforms, just everybody in the room? Okay. All right. And I'm sure that curve has been very wide as far as the number of people who even know how to navigate it. So it does make your jobs a lot more challenging, I'm sure. All right.
The struggle is real. A friend of mine who's in the funeral business, he contracted it 2 weeks ago at a funeral, helping a lady. And I asked him, I said, well, hey, did you have a mask on? No, I didn't have a mask on. Did you have gloves on? No, I didn't have gloves on. Okay. All right. Okay. So he spent last week in the hospital, and he said it's about the worst thing he's ever gone through. So, it is real. So it's not like it's some conspiracy. It really goes on.
Right.
What do you think it's going to take to make it more real for people? I mean, we have a panel of.
Well, I mean, what I've seen personally, a lot of it's media driven. I mean, for the most part, the governor didn't do himself any favors by saying, "Hey, we've passed the peak. We've passed the peak now." No, we haven't. I mean, people are still dying. They're still contracting this. And basically, I know the governor, everybody's, he's in everybody's pockets, and they're making him basically say we need to open the beach back up. This is how this ball spins from tourism, and it's bad for business. It's like Florida. You see a total of dead people, and you're trying to tell people to come on vacation, come to this hotel, come to this restaurant and eat, that type of thing. So that's why I think there is economically driven why they're saying we're past the peak side of that. That's my personal standpoint. So You know, somebody might think differently, but I think it's just as bad now as it was 2 weeks ago, if not
It
maybe
is.
worse, because I think now people are not as vigilant and they're letting their guard down. They're just following their leaders. When your governor gets on TV and say, we passed the peak, we're opening the hotels back up Friday, we're opening the beach back up, that's a green light for people to go back out and intermingle and spread it even more. So that's what
Well,
I think.
I wanted to say though, April, I think that I think what you're doing with this is amazing because I think that our community has been looking at a community that didn't look like us,
Right.
spreading and talking the word. I think it makes a difference when people like us see us talking about it and you can relate to it. I had a conversation with a gentleman a couple of weeks ago, and he was telling me about this club. And he had gone out to this club, and I said, a club? And he was like, yeah. I was like, a club? And he said, yeah, it was about 80 people. And I was thinking to myself, how do you go to a club at this point? And
Right.
so, I reminded him, I said, you live right in the midst of your grandmother and your mother who just had surgery. I said, how can you go to a club? I said, if they got sick because of you, they might not make it. I said, you have to think about this. This thing is real.
Right.
And you have to think about who you interact with. I said, man, if you were out in the woods and you live by yourself and all, that's fine. But you don't. And so I think we have to recognize what's important to us and live our lives and handle it that way. I mean, I don't know that we're living that way. And I don't know that there are other people that are, if the police or I don't think that they're monitoring us the way we should be monitoring ourselves. And nobody can do that but us, because nobody knows where the clubs are or the places to gather but us. And so we need to put a stop to that. I think that, being 30 and 40 is probably a wonderful thing, but you have to pay attention to all of the people that are 60 and on high blood pressure medicine and obese and all the other issues that we as a people have. And that makes a difference in our survival rate with this disease.
Right.
So I really think that we really going to have to talk amongst ourselves and we're going to have to explain to our own community that you have to protect your community and the people that you love by distancing yourself and by limiting what you're willing to do.
Absolutely. Tammy, I know that you have to exit for another call. Is there any thing that you would like to leave with us and our viewers as parting words, maybe I guess your final advice in terms of what they need to know and what they should be doing to make sure that they don't hurt Big Mama, as the Surgeon General said.
Like Mr. Williams said, I mean, social distance yourself, and please don't go to a club. That is the worst thing you could do, because when you go home, it's not just you. I mean, if you live in the woods, like he said, and that's fine. But I'm sure he don't live in the woods. He got to go home, and he's going home to other people, So I just advise everyone to social distance. If you're out, wear your mask. Don't do any gatherings. No more than, if you have a gathering, if it's got to be your children, and sometimes that could be too risky to be around your own family, because you yourself could be asymptomatic and you don't know it, or someone in your family can and they don't know it. So like I keep saying, it's real. And I just wish that people will remember that it's real. And I think they'll understand it when it knocks at their door.
Yes.
Then they'll really understand that it's real. Thank you, April, for having me as a guest on the network. I thank all my colleagues. I pray that everyone is safe, continue to stay safe, and continue to practice social distancing. And thank you so much. And y'all have a blessed and safe weekend.
You do the same. Tell Atu we said hello, and we send our best wishes, and you guys stay safe in what you do.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
So I'm getting ready to add Marilyn Hemingway, who's the president and CEO of the Gullah Geechee Chamber of Commerce down in Georgetown. Hey, Marilyn, how are you?
Hi, everybody, and thank you for having me. This has been a fascinating subject. I was offline watching, and thank you for having this subject, April. And thank you, everybody, for joining the network program. Very good. Very good.
Yeah. Thank you, Marilyn, for joining us every Friday for the updates. And of course, this topic was kind of a, that definitely was a joint effort between my Thundercat, Dr. McIver. We were brainstorming and we are like, can we put it together in 24 hours? And we did it. So
Very
thank you,
good.
Dr. Mack. Yes, thank you, Dr. Mack. So of course, we still have George Williams of McKeever Funeral Home, Marvin Latimer of Latimer's Funeral Home, and Poyette Brumel of Jackson and McGill Funeral Home with us. If you're joining, just tuning in now. And thank you all for commenting. Please make sure you post your questions, and we will definitely, facilitate that, the comments and the questions, and moderate them for our panel of experts here. And of course, we're talking about the end of life realities related to COVID-19. Our guests have already given us some wonderful information that we all need to not only take in, but share with others. We haven't even gotten to the nitty gritty yet. We just needed to shift gears a little bit because one of our guests had to leave. But Dr. McIver is going to share with us some COVID-19 updates. And then our guests will continue to just kind of talk about what those numbers mean to them and answer some of the other questions that we have for them today. So Dr. Mack, it's on you.
Okay. Thank you all for being on, and thank you, April, for continuing to have this going. And Miss Marilyn, it's good to see you as always.
What's up?
In the last week, worldwide, the number of cases have gone from 2.8 million to 3.4 million worldwide. The number of deaths worldwide have gone from 195,000 to 240,000. This has just been in the last week worldwide. In the United States, the number of cases in the last week have gone from right around 900, a little over 900,000 to 1.1 million. That's cases. And the number of deaths in the US have gone from 51,000 to 65,000 in the last week. In South Carolina, I just got the latest stats just about 5 minutes ago. In the past week, the number of cases in South Carolina have gone from 4,917 up to 6,258. The number of deaths in South Carolina in the past week have gone from 196 deaths up to 256 deaths. In Horry County, the number of cases have gone from 196 up to 223. And the number of deaths in Horry County have gone from 12 to 16. In Georgetown County, the number of cases stayed the same at 43, and the deaths stayed the same at 3. And for my good friend, Miss McGill Brumel, in Marion County, the cases have gone from 34 to 36 in the last week with 2 deaths. Okay. Now, I want to say this. Every stat that I gave is grossly under what the numbers really are. And let me say this for 2 reasons. Number one, we know that there are not a lot of people getting tested. South Carolina just got over 1% of the population getting tested on Wednesday. So it's still 99%, 98.8% of people in South Carolina have not gotten tested. Now, what's becoming even more apparent in the medical world is that the numbers are skewed in those people that are dying, because people are actually dying at home, and they're dying before they're even getting tested to see whether or not they have COVID. We know that there's a number of people that are having heart attacks and strokes, and I'll get into that in just a second, that are having heart attacks and strokes and not even going to the hospital because they're afraid to go. At MUSC, I talked to some of my friends at the stroke center, and they're seeing about a 40 to 50% decrease in number of patients that are going there that they would normally see for stroke symptoms. People didn't just stop having strokes. They're just not going to the hospital. They're having
to go.
And they're dying. And the reason why this is important is because there's certain medicines, clot busting medicines, that we can give that are essential to be given in a timely manner to help prolong life or reduce significant disease. Another thing too, in the past week in South Carolina, the number of cases have gone up 21%. And in South Carolina, the number of deaths have gone up 23%, all in the past week. We're seeing more young people that are having strokes in the hospital. We call that large vessel disease, that are just having strokes. And we're seeing a number of people that are ending up on dialysis because of COVID. We talked a little bit a couple of days ago about a couple of things that are going on between the heart attacks, the strokes, the brain bleeds, and the COVID tolls. That's a common question that I get. And it has to just do with inflammation that this COVID is creating inside the blood vessels. The inflammation reduces the normal flow of the bloodstream, which creates more stagnation in the blood. If the person gets septic, which means they have overwhelming disease in the blood, it can lead to the blood clumping. And that's where the end organs, the heart, the brain, the kidneys aren't getting the proper blood flow when they start not functioning well. So it's a major issue. We're still having places that are having major problems. New York City is still having major problems. But the concern is that once these politicians open up places like Horry County, open up Myrtle Beach, there are going to be more people coming here from states that have high incidences of people that are positive and people that are asymptomatic carriers. And that's just the true fact of the matter. And so that's why Myrtle Beach has been identified as a place that will potentially be a hot spot within the next 2 to 4 weeks.
So I see in the comments, and I know we probably can't tap into that right now. Marilyn, if you have the ability to do so, please see if you can find it. But they say that the governor has just lifted the restrictions for travel to the beach. Is that what's going on, Marilyn, with that?
For work and home. So basically the travel that he had in place, just going to work and home, he lifted it today. So basically he opened the state.
So there's no more stay-at-home order.
No,
is that what it is?
Basically.
No
Yes, governor just removed home or work order. So yeah.
Right.
Well, that's what I was telling you about before. I said, I think that's purely an economic decision. I think industry behind him was kind of pushing him to do that, because you're going to see the same thing happen in Michigan before it's over with. They're not as, reliant on tourism as we are. They're more manufacturing there. But, this place, Myrtle Beach, Conway, is basically 98% tourism, and that's just kind of how it is.
Well,
that's why the restrictions are. I'm curious from Dr. Mack. I got a question. How, for the most part, how is it transmitted from one person to the other? I know, the simple, 5 microns of saliva or sputum or whatever. What do you think about the aerosol portion of that? How probable is that? Because evidently, obviously, I read too much because I'm super paranoid about this. And I was just curious from an epidemiologist type standpoint,
right?
What's the transference from it being aerosol? Because I think everything is experience personally. For me, I'm thinking that it's aerosol, but they just don't want to say that because they don't want everybody to panic.
Well, it is respiratory and it is contact, so it is both. And that's the reason why when I first started giving these talks, I would say stuff like, a cough has about 3,000 droplets. A sneeze has up to 8 to 10,000 droplets. A sneeze can go as fast as 100 miles an hour. That's where the 6 feet came from, because most people, when they cough or sneeze, the particles are not going to go beyond 6 feet. But this is a respiratory and it is a contact situation.
Okay, now let's say you go to the gas station and you pick up a gas pump. Now, you personally, are you sanitizing your hands?
I
wear gloves.
Oh yeah,
I wear gloves when I go to the gas pump.
I think gloves are a misnomer because you can still get it on your gloves and touch your eye.
The problem.
Well, no, I take the gloves off before I get in the car.
The problem with the gloves is people aren't taking the gloves off. They're wearing the same pair of gloves all day long.
That's right. Yeah.
That's the problem with the gloves. The
Excuse
gloves are
me.
Well, another thing I have,
Hello,
Yeah.
hello.
With Poet,
another
yes.
thing I have for the whole panel is
I have
this,
never. Go ahead, Marvin.
yeah, well, this is basically for Poet because she's right there with the sixth district. The whole 50-person thing, I think that's a misnomer also, because I think we're getting to the point where we think, okay, that's safe, 50 people. But if 2 of those are asymptomatic carriers, it's not doing any good. This will be 150 people. So I don't see how 50 limiting that, because I think the whole thing that was a game changer was asymptomatic spreaders. And then on top of that, I guess Winston can speak more about this. I read a study that the person sheds the virus a day or 2 before it becomes symptomatic. So then, so not like checking a fever is going to tell you the person has it. Not like, I'm just curious from Winston's standpoint, what's the probability of the virus shedding a day before, 2 days before, where somebody is picking it up just that easily?
Yeah, a lot of you can start shedding earlier, and in some studies have shown maybe even up to 4 to 6 weeks of shedding. Okay. Now let's go back to the to the gas pump for a second. The studies have shown that this virus can be on plastic up to 72 hours. Okay, but let me say this way. It's been found to be on there up to 72 hours, but it doesn't mean it's at a concentration high enough to create illness up to 72 hours.
All right.
In other words, the virus starts to decay, it starts to break down, and it wouldn't probably be as much a viral particle at hour 70 as it would be at hour 5. But it was found to be up to 72 hours on plastic.
Let me just say this.
Can we let Poet get in, please? Go ahead.
As far as our funeral home, and we have never told people that they needed to wear gloves, because just as Doc said, if they're not taking the gloves off, then they're just cross-contaminating with whatever they touch. Mm-hmm. The only time that we're actually using gloves at our facility is, of course, those of us who are handling the deceased. We're definitely gloved up. The individuals who are working our funerals and collecting soil tissue, they're picking that stuff up with gloves and disposing of those gloves immediately afterwards. And we're putting those tissues in bags, sealing them up and disposing of that. Because, I mean, when you're going to go to the gas station, you really just need to have it in your mind to have some sanitizer with you or some sanitizing wipes, and to be ready to wash your hands, wipe your steering wheel down, whatever you touched in your car, whenever you get back to your home, where you can, because one thing we haven't addressed, which is really the elephant in the room, is the lack of these supplies being available to our people.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, you can go. I have a cousin. She's a manager at a Dollar General. She hasn't had. She went weeks before they would even have a can of Lysol spray in their store. The truck just didn't have it. Okay, so we're telling people sanitize when they have nothing to sanitize with. So what we have to do is we have to tell them alternatives that they can use, using hydrogen peroxide or using a bleach concentration, putting in a gallon of water, putting maybe a couple of tablespoons of bleach, so that you can spray down your area, spray your shoes, so that you're not tracking stuff on the floors and the babies are crawling around. Mopping your floors constantly and that kind of thing, making sure that you wipe your door handles and everything that you touch. When you've been out somewhere and you put your hand on something, you just got to always be conscious that this thing could get on you, you could transfer it. It could get on you, you could transfer it. And so that's been the big thing. As far as how many people at a funeral, you could have COVID transfer with 2 people at a funeral. So it doesn't really, we understand why the 50 was given, because realistically, we're talking about a once in a lifetime event, a funeral. We're not talking about a birthday party. We're not talking about the block party. We're not talking about those kinds of things that can be rescheduled or something can be done at another time. We're talking about the homegoing of a loved one, a mother, a father, a sister, a brother, a child. And so what we try to do is, in a humane way, make it so that the family could gather, and so that they could gather in numbers where they could be spread apart. Now, if you have a small area and you know you can't get 50 people in there I have a large chapel. My people can come in, sit 5 to a row, every other row, and they have their 6 feet. And so my thing is, and maybe not 6 feet, but they definitely have a good space between them and the next person if they so choose to do so. Some people, I have 4 people sitting in a row, and they sit all together, but they came in a car together. So they can make that argument. I rode here with her. I can't sit with her. So all we can do is give people the tools, give them the support, and pray that they will use them. And that's what the COVID policies for the funeral homes are all about, making sure that this is something that people can go over at the house together with the family. That's why you leave it with the family. And then that way, it's not, oh, what did she say? What did she say? No, it's right there in writing. Okay.
I've had those conversations with them such that they had the conversations even before they came in the funeral, just like you had. We also have that policy. We do the visitations, but we have modified our chapel area such that they have to go through, come out, go in one door, come out the other door. We have sanitation before we come into the funeral home, where temperatures are taken, where hand sanitizer is used before they come in. We have 10 people in the building completely. So when someone goes out, the next one is waiting at the door, they can come in.
Right.
So, but I think when we're exposed to the fact that we're trying to create that air of social distance, when they get the notion that, oh, this is kind of serious, then I think we'll get to realize this is kind of serious. You know, when we talked about opening up the beach area, our community are the ones that are doing the housekeeping. And you think about somebody with this virus sitting in those hotels, and now our people come in and we have to do the maid service. So these hotels need to have complete gear for them to come in to handle these linens and things, and these, because it's like going in somebody's home. And that needs to be a requirement for their work situation. If they're going to have this, and if they open it up, they need to make sure that they protect the workers that allow this to happen.
And I think I agree with you, George. There should be an outcry to our governor and everybody in control of the state of South Carolina that if you're going to do this, you need to protect South Carolinians and make the necessary provisions available. You know how hard it's been for us as funeral directors just getting our gear. And this is stuff that we get all the time.
Exactly.
And we're calling, I'm giving you guys an example, the bunny suits that I use when I embalm bodies, those things are on a 2-month delay because so many people need them now. As a matter of fact, they just called me yesterday and said, well, we don't have the mediums. I wear a medium. They said, we have larges. I ordered 50 large, I ordered 50 medium suits. And so I'm just telling you, these are kinds of issues. I said, well, send me what you have. I'll just tighten it up, whatever. But the point I'm making is people are desperate for this PPE. And if we're the professionals and we're desperate, imagine, little Sonia who's going in there making up beds.
So my question is, are you seeking these PPEs as individual funeral homes, or is the funeral home association advocating for funeral homes? How's that working?
Both ways. And still have the issue trying to get them. And they've doubled and tripled the prices along with that.
So is the federal government also impacting this? I hear, there's competition because the federal government, there's not a national plan. So the federal government is basically competing against state governments to get PPE. So does that also impact what you're trying to do also?
It does.
Absolutely.
It does.
Absolutely. All of those bodies that you see in New York and those refrigerated trucks, they're going to have to be handled by a mortician. And they're going to have to be handled by a mortician who is completely clad in PPE. That's a lot of people, and that's a lot of PPE.
That's a lot of people.
And when we're having to, thank God, I have not had to reuse any of mine. But if we get to the point where we're going to have to reuse PPE, I mean, it's going to be a sad day because,
sad.
that's going to put us in a crisis. And I'm just glad. Two things I'm happy about with this is that it has created collaboration, but it's also created American ingenuity. I love what Governor Cuomo has done in New York, that whole state, in opening up the factories to start making items in America for Americans.
Right.
Because there's no reason why we don't, with all the sewing factories that are out of business now, there's no reason why we shouldn't have sewing factories now making those jumpsuits.
Textile factories in North Carolina, they could be making masks.
Yes.
Because of all the textile industry has moved to China, we should be making masks. We should be making people.
And no greater example than the women now and the men now who are making the masks.
Oh.
I have a ton of former Sara Lee workers who are now basically becoming self-employed again. Making masks because we have the ability. We just don't have the support.
Right.
Right.
And I think it was a great question that Marilyn asked as far as whether or not a coalition or consortium is stepping up to demand these supplies for you. But it says a lot when, even if as a collective body, the needle is not moving. What does that really say about, the true underlying reasons or causes why these things are not happening? It's just astonishing to me. I'm learning so much right now. I can't believe that as funeral home directors, in the most crucial aspect of what could possibly happen with this COVID virus, and that's you all properly burying the dead, that you don't have what you need. Exactly. And people are taking a lot for granted, because when they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing, then of course it's just compounding the issue, and it's going to make it harder for everyone. So, it's just blowing my mind right now, and I don't know what needs to be done. And I'm following all the comments here, and I'm seeing that, the governor's having a conference that started a few minutes ago or whatever. And there's some things that are happening, but it looks like the social distancing order has been removed starting Monday, and a few other things. I'm sure George is scratching his head already.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Bad move.
Yeah.
I really, speaking to what you said, April, I think the calculation has been made that they're willing to lose a certain number of lives. This is the price of doing business. And this is why people need to understand this is a healthcare crisis. This is not an economic crisis. We can recover an economy. We cannot recover lives. That's it. Dead is dead. But we are in the midst of a country that has lost its moral backbone. And they've made a calculated decision. I mean, Jared Kushner came on this week and basically gave a mission accomplished speech and said it's okay that 60,000 plus people are dead. That's a success.
Because
that's crazy. I mean, I'm learning this, and to sit here and listen to this, this is
it's mind blowing.
It's crazy.
They don't look like him. That's the issue. They don't look like him. So if it's just that many, well then okay.
Well, even many of them do look like him. It's just a matter of the numbers.
They're not in his circle,
and not the numbers of people. They're looking at the numbers in their bank accounts, in their 401ks, and in their investment accounts. I mean, it's just people don't matter.
It's not in his circle. I think the people of his caliber that have that kind of money, they're not dying. It's not because those people don't work. So they don't have to be anywhere. It's the people that are in these meat factories and all these things. Those are the people who have to work. And they don't know those people, even though those are the people who supported their candidate. Those are the people who voted for him. But those people, he doesn't know who they are. So
that's the cost of doing business. Those people are the cost of doing business.
Exactly.
Well,
that's it. That's calculated. It's cold to say that, but that's why you got to look out for yourself and stay home, and if you can, and practice safe social distancing. Wear your gloves, wear your mask, hand sanitizer, because your government is not going to do it at this point.
But can I give a little warning to those individuals who are thinking like that? Did not the president of Harvard and his wife get COVID? Did not Tom Hanks and his wife get COVID?
That's true.
Did not the Prime Minister of England get COVID? I mean,
but they also they also don't have they don't have underlying health conditions. Also,
it doesn't matter. They contracted this condition, and the point of the matter is you don't know a person's health because you don't know who has an alcohol problem. You don't know what people do when they go home. You just know what they do as a job. Or what position they hold politically. But the point of the matter is, this is a respiratory disease that is airborne. It's kind of like tuberculosis. Rich people and poor people can get TB. If they're in the wrong air at the wrong time, it's going into their lung. It's going to sit in their throat. If they don't drink enough, they're not hydrated enough to wash it out. It's going to go down into the lungs. It's going to go ahead and start doing what it does, and it's spreading, and that mucus is going to get thick and become like concrete, and they will asphyxiate. And that's how it kills you.
It was no coincidence that these restrictions were lifted when people were getting their stimulus money.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's make sure we keep that real. That's not a coincidence. Okay. The other part of it is that people are still dying. So, it really infuriates physicians when you get people that get up and say stuff like, well, it's okay if 2 or 3% of the people die. I mean, as if it's collateral damage, and the point that, is really even more frustrating on the physician side is that you got physicians that are taking care of people in the hospital who don't even have proper PPE. You got people that don't even have N95 masks, and that's reckless and it's irresponsible. I've said this a couple times before, and I'm gonna say it again. As a person that studies medical history, there's no surprise that we had a pandemic. It was going to happen. The surprise was that we wasn't ready for it.
We weren't ready.
These things happen. They happen. There have been 250 in the last 250 years. There have been 10 pandemics. This will happen. And it's going to happen again. The problem is we weren't ready. And that's the disappointing thing. But I will tell you, the majority of pandemics have a second and a third peak. And it happens anywhere between 2 to 6 months after the flattening of the curve. 4 months from now, we'll be back in winter. Okay? And we'll be dealing with cold and flu and pneumonia season. And we'll be dealing likely with the second peak of COVID-19. Now, a lot of people they don't take it as seriously because the government isn't taking it seriously. Local, state, and federal. They're downplaying it. But 65,000 people dead in the United States is a lot of people dead. And that number was projected to be somewhere between 100 and 200,000. At the rate we're going, we will get to 100,000, at least to 85. The problem is, like I said, is we will never know the true numbers of those that are positive, nor will we know the true number of people that died, because there's some people dying at home.
That's right.
So the issue is that there's kind of a selfish mentality that, well, it's only a few people, or it's only 3% of people. Well, as a physician, I take that personally because I took an oath to save everybody that I can. So to me, 3% is too much. In South Carolina, 4% of those people that have tested positive, 4% have died in South Carolina. In Horry County, of those people that have tested positive, 6% of those have died. So these numbers aren't made up. I get upset when I hear people, comparing this to the seasonal flu. This is crazy. This is not the seasonal flu. This is a novel virus without a treatment and without a vaccine.
And I was just getting ready to ask that question.
Seasonal flu has both treatment and a vaccine.
Right.
COVID-19 has neither one.
So I was getting ready to ask if we're closer to a vaccine, and if you will, Dr. Mack, please address what's going on with these so-called corona tests.
Okay, let's talk about it. Okay, there's really two major types of tests. There's the antibody test and there's the rapid test. Okay, the rapid test kind of tells you on the spot whether you're positive or not. That's good to know, but it doesn't mean that you can't go out 4 days later and get it. So that's the first thing. The second thing is the antibody testing tells you whether you've been exposed to COVID-19. The problem with that is we don't know whether that exposure really gives you immunity right now. Those studies are still being undertaken. Okay, so just because you've got a positive antibody test doesn't mean you won't get it again. Most viruses have anywhere between a 1 to 3 year window that gives you immunity, but because this is such a new virus, we're not even sure about that. There have been studies and reports in places like China and Korea where there have been reports that people got it a second time. So again, I see all this talk about antibody testing, and believe me, I'm of the belief that we do need to test people. I'm just not sure how much it's going to give us right now, as you know, other than just telling us what areas have been exposed a lot. And so that's an issue. The other issue too is I've had the opportunity to buy rapid tests about 3 times now, and I chose not to do it because a number of these tests on the market are not FDA approved. Not only that, some of them are being sold on the black market, and you never know whether they're actually sensitive and specific to what they're supposed to be testing.
So like the testing they were doing in Columbia yesterday at Eau Claire High School, I think Representative Todd Rutherford or someone was kind of spearheading that.
Right.
I don't know. I think you and I were talking about that yesterday. We don't know if they were antibody tests or actual so-called coronavirus tests.
And the likelihood is that they were rapid tests. The only question is who was the manufacturer? The FDA are trying to rein these companies in to at least get them to send some of their tests to them to test to see whether they're accurate in testing what they're supposed to. The thought is that a lot of these rapid tests are about 15 to 20% inaccurate. So that's the issue that I have with some of the testing. And that's why I think the FDA needs to ramp this up to make sure that they're having these companies accountable to say whether or not their tests are valid and reliable.
I have a
Dr.
question.
Mack. Yeah, go ahead. Dr. Mack, in the last couple of days, I've heard of people being denied tests. What will it take to get tests? And I think I mentioned before, my father and I were quarantined because I was exposed. It took them 11 days to give my dad's test results back. At the time, supposed backlog, not enough tests.
Right. Well,
I think that situation was corrected. They never tested me, even though I called back.
Not really.
No. So what? Now I'm hearing people are exhibiting symptoms and they're not being tested.
Right. It's a supply and demand issue. It's a supply and demand issue. So granted, there are more tests in circulation now than there were 4 weeks ago, but it's still a supply and demand based off of the number of people that want to get tested and that should get tested, coupled with the people that are actually getting tested. Like I said before, South Carolina just got to the 1% mark of testing 1% of the population on Wednesday. All before it was 0.5% of people, 0.6% of the population. It's 5.3 million people in South Carolina. We just got to over 53,000 tests on Wednesday. So that's an issue. The other issue is that people don't know, when their next batch of tests may be coming. So for initially, when you were talking about Maryland, they were only testing people weeks ago who they thought were going to be admitted to the hospital. The other folks, they were just telling them to go home and quarantine. So that's an issue there. It has gotten better, but it's still far, far away from what it should be.
Poyet, you wanted to chime in on something before we move on to the next topic?
I wanted to ask, when we initially, I guess it was back in March or maybe late February, when the World Health Organization was trying to give us tests, and they were declined. Our president wouldn't accept them or whatever. Do you know the quality of those tests? Because those are the tests they were actually using in China,
right,
and Korea, and evidently the tests were pretty accurate because they were able to test and lower the curve, and now get back to business fairly as usual.
The issue with that is that the president has an issue with the World Health Organization. Okay, and that's just clear and simple. I don't think he respects Dr. Tedros, who's over the World Health Organization, and the World Health Organization has had some issues. So to keep that real on that, the three biggest benefactors to the World Health Organization are the United States government, Bill Gates Foundation, and China. The concern about the World Health Organization was that they might not have jumped on this faster than they really should have because they didn't want to offend China. China's a huge benefactor to the World Health Organization. So that was an issue. The other issue is that I think the president and Bill Gates have issues. Yeah. And that's part of the reason why he pulled money away from Trump pulled money away from the World Health Organization. He doesn't respect Tedros. I don't really know if he really respects Bill Gates either. But there's a lot of politics and a lot of jockeying here. And usually when healthcare, and I have a saying, when healthcare becomes a political issue, people die.
Oh, yeah.
People die.
And I think that needs to be very clear to people so that they'll understand that what they can do, the things that they do have control over, such as washing hands, wearing a mask, doing those things, social distancing and doing those things, even if you have to go back to work, you need to have a system in place for how you're going to protect yourself.
Right. Yeah. The second part of April's question about treatment, there are a lot of people, a lot of things that's gaining momentum here is what's called convalescent plasma. In other words, you take the plasma, which is the liquid part of blood, and you take it from people who tested positive and been treated and have improved, and you take their plasma and donate it to people that are sick, that are very sick, that are likely to die. That's called convalescent plasma, and there have been some good results with that. Studies still have to be ongoing, but physicians will use that when it comes to the point of not really having much else to offer. The second thing with treatment is that this cocktail that Trump was pushing, the Z-Pack and the hydroxychloroquine, an ultimate failure. It has been killing folks. Both of those medicines by themselves can have some issues. Certainly, the hydroxychloroquine can cause complete heart block. Doctors have known that forever.
Can you repeat that?
Say it again.
Repeat what you just said. You were breaking up just a little bit.
Okay, so I was saying the cocktail that Trump was pressing, the Z-Pack and the hydroxychloroquine, has been a failure. People have died from that. As physicians, we know hydroxychloroquine is a deadly medicine. It's good for what it's studied for. It's good for lupus. It's good for rheumatoid arthritis, but it has not been adequately studied for this. And it is a medicine that can cause a complete heart block where this person's heart will stop. That can happen. The other issue is we know we're not injecting any kind of disinfectant into people's veins or drinking it. And unfortunately, there have been some people who have done this.
You've tried it.
And that's the truth. So, again, those are things that, are kind of crazy. There's another medicine that's out now, Revlimid, that has shown some promise that I think they might have mentioned earlier this week. It's an antiviral, but it is only given for the sickest of patients in the hospital. So this isn't something that's in a pill form where you can just take and outside of the hospital.
Georgia, you want to chime in before we move on to one of the last topics that we'll talk about today? You're on mute. Unmute your. Okay.
The sad part is the fact that all of this is just so political. You've got these people dying,
Mhm.
you've got all kinds of misinformation, you've got the president prescribing medications and things that ought to happen and what you ought to go do. And the sad part is that, there's no check. There's no way to say, no one believes, when you say that's not true. You got physicians that are disputing this information, and it just comes out and people believe it. It is unreal. But I guess that's where we live. Where we
are now. Exactly. So, of course, the main purpose, this has been a great discussion, and, the comments that are coming from the news feed, everyone has definitely been engaged in what you're saying, and hopefully they trust the information that all of you have given, because you are definitely on the front lines, and it's amazing because you're pretty much from start to finish if you think about it. What are some things that families can do to begin planning for the future, whether it means we have now moved to a stage in terms of what we're being asked to do, where we have to return to society and, go out into our communities and our workplaces, regardless of how we feel or what we believe about things. What can people do at this point to, I guess, have some assurance that they're at least doing their part to be okay? And the other part of it is, what can families do now if they're impacted by COVID-19, meaning there's a family member whose prognosis is not good? What can they do now to start planning for what is the inevitable?
Wow. So a lot of questions there. There's a lot in that question.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I feel like if planning is always, when you pre-plan, there's a level-headedness. There's a calmness about that. You remove a certain portion of the emotion when you pre-plan. So I think it's necessary. I think it's a good thing. And you may end up with the kind of service and in the realm of how we have to do things to something that you'd be proud of and pleased with. And like Poet said, that it's a one-time thing. This is not something like a birthday party that you're ongoing. This is the end. And so to have something that you could look back on and feel like you can move forward, you celebrated the life, you had a dignified service within the realm of this pandemic. I think pre-planning is the way to go. As far as families being safe, the social distancing, and we have to demand that, that our family pays attention to the fact of where they're going, who are they around, because it's just that bad that, that we have to pay attention to that social distancing. And you do go to the gas station, and I travel with hand sanitizer and wipes in my car to wipe things down when I touch them. If you can't get your hands on that, fine. If you can't make it, get your spray bottle, put it in your car with the Clorox and some water and paper towels or something, and make some wipes. We got to put some effort towards trying to stay safe at whatever level we can.
Absolutely. Poet, yes. Mm-hmm.
Ditto to everything George just said. And I want to take it a little step further, because those of you know me in my other life, I'm heavy about wellness and making sure that you're on top of your health. And so families definitely need to take a step back while you have time. Take a step back and watch how you're eating. Junk food. I'm really happy almost that we've had this time of people being home, because we have more people cooking and actually planning meals and trying to eat nutritious meals. And so that's something that we really need to keep up post COVID-19, and also to make sure that you're, hydrating. And summer's coming. Stay hydrated. Take your vitamins, minerals, essential fatty acids, amino acids. you got to have that full spectrum of nutrients in order to keep a strong immune system, because that's your battleground for COVID-19.
Yeah.
Your immune system. If your immune system is compromised with stress, lack of proper nutrition, lack of rest, lack of proper exercise, those kinds of things, then it doesn't matter how many you could put 10 masks on. You know, at some point, if you are exposed, if you touch the wrong thing and your hand goes to mouth or whatever the case, and you become infected, if your immune system is not up to par, then you're going to have a poor outcome. And so, you know, I'm always telling people, do what you're supposed to do. Do the research. We go on Facebook and the internet and look up everything else. We look about fashion, hairstyles, how to do makeup this way and that way. Learn how to eat. Learn how to eat properly. Learn what to put in your body. Get off of white salt. Get on some pink Himalayan salt. Get on the alkaline water. Do the things that are going to make your body a powerhouse, so that if COVID try to stomp in your life, you can stomp it out. And because you can't do it being a weakling.
You're right.
That's a very valuable.
That's the truth.
Yes. So you guys, we have approached the hour and 15-minute mark, and usually try to keep it, you know, around about an hour and 30 minutes tops. This conversation has been one of the best that we've had since we've been live streaming it, and I just want to thank you so much, George Williams of Akiva's Funeral Home and Poet Bromell of Jackson and McGill for being a part of this. Marvin Latimer, he was trying to get back on, but he couldn't get back on. Marvin of Latimer's Funeral Home, and of course Tammy Williams representing Ocean View Funeral Home for joining us earlier until she had to leave. As always, Marilyn Hemingway for joining the crew on Fridays at 4:00 with this information. And of course, I could not do a COVID update without our COVID expert, the resident, the guru, Dr. Winston McIver Jr. Thank you so much. You know, this has been very enlightening and I think empowering. And if nothing else, I think that people need to walk away knowing that, and I know there was some distraction in the background about the governor's press conference, maybe about 30 minutes ago. Yes, he's lifting restrictions. Yes, he's opening up things. Yes, he's even removed the social distancing. But you have to be mindful and use your every bit of discernment to know what's best to do and to take care of yourself. So lifting those bans does not mean we're out of the woods. It does not mean COVID is over. So please do not interpret it as COVID is over. It just means that for some reason there's some folks who need to get on with business as usual. And unfortunately, we have to, you know, we still have to be mindful of how we carry ourselves. So, Dr. Mack, you were putting your finger up, I guess.
Yeah, I just want to say a few things. Again, I like to piggyback on what April said. We talked about this yesterday, and we decided to try to have the morticians on, and we want to thank you all for giving your perspective on this, because quite honestly, I was asked questions about, you know, morticians and how they're handling bodies. And hey, I do what I do. I stay in my lane. That's not what I do.
That's right.
So thank you all for agreeing on short notice to do that. A couple things I want to say though. This is deadly. So let's just keep it what it is, regardless of what the restrictions. People are still dying. Like I said, in South Carolina, the numbers have gone up. The number of deaths, you know, just in the last week. Number two, I'd like to say, and this is important, to follow the data and not the dates. These politicians are giving dates when this will open and that will open. Follow the dates. Follow the data. Not the date. Follow the data. If you still see people are dying and numbers are still going up, then forget the dates. Follow the data. Okay. Number two, the next thing, I'd like to say, change it up just a little bit and say more physical distancing and more social connected.
Okay.
Amen.
Physical distance and more social connected. And number two, this is going to get better. The numbers are going to go down. Right now, physicians, medical community are trying to reduce the incidence, which is the frequency of the disease, and the prevalence, which is the commonness of it. That's very important in trying to mitigate and reduce deaths. This will get better, but we will have the winter that will be coming. And so again, whatever practices that you're doing now, you need to make sure that you continue to do them as cold and flu and pneumonia rolls back in the fall. Okay. And again, just stay vigilant about what you're doing. And thank you all again for consenting to be on here. And I appreciate that as well.
Absolutely. So I just wanted to make mention that we will be back next Friday with more COVID updates. I'm not quite sure who our special guest will be, but we are definitely going to make sure that we bring some topics that will be, educational and enlightening and empowering and worthwhile. Your time is very valuable to us, and we do thank you for tuning in. You can share this video later on. It will be posted on all of my social media pages, and we'll also make it available on the Whittemore Community Magazine's YouTube channel a little bit later. And speaking of the Whittemore Community Magazine, on Monday at 6 p.m., we will have James Paisley, who is with the Waccamaw EOC, as our special guest. He will talk about all of the resources that the Waccamaw EOC has available for people who are in need of resources as they battle through this COVID-19 crisis. And so I'll be putting out a promo a little bit later so that you can, be alerted of that particular live event as well. And that's Monday at 6 p.m., the Whittemore Community Magazine. So thank you all so much for tuning in today. I really appreciate it. We're going into the weekend. Be safe, everyone. Please be safe, be vigilant. And above all, be blessed. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. God bless you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.